The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in courtroom 7B of the Jefferson County Courthouse in rural Ohio, casting harsh shadows across the worn wooden benches. It was a Tuesday morning in late September, and the air conditioning struggled against the unseasonable heat that had settled over the small town of Millbrook. But inside that courtroom, the temperature felt arctic. 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez sat rigidly in the front row, her small frame nearly swallowed by the adult-sized chair. Her fingers clutched a faded brown teddy bear named Mr. Buttons, the same bear she'd had since she was 2 years old, now missing an eye and worn thin from years of comfort-seeking embraces. Emma's dark hair hung limply around her pale face, unwashed for days. Her mother, Maria Rodriguez, had tried to brush it that morning, but Emma had pulled away, retreating into the silence that had become her refuge. 21 days. That's how long it had been since Emma had spoken a single word. 3 weeks since her world had shattered completely, when her parents' custody battle had escalated from bitter to vicious. 3 weeks since she'd overheard her father screaming that her mother was poisoning her mind. 3 weeks since her mother had sobbed into the phone, telling her sister that she was afraid of what Emma's father might do. Judge Patricia Morrison sat behind her elevated bench, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the case file for what felt like the 100th time. Rodriguez v. Rodriguez. Just another broken family in her courtroom, except this one was different. This child's silence was unlike anything she'd encountered in her 30 years on the bench. It wasn't defiance or stubbornness. It was pure, traumatized shutdown. "Your Honor," began Marcus Chen, the father's attorney, standing with practiced confidence in his expensive navy suit. "My client has substantial evidence that Ms. Rodriguez has been systematically alienating Emma from her father. The child refuses to speak during his visitation periods. She cries when it's time to go to his house. This is textbook parental alienation." Maria Rodriguez stiffened beside her attorney, Linda Washington, a local lawyer who'd taken the case pro bono after hearing Maria's desperate plea at a community legal clinic. Linda stood, her voice steady but tinged with barely contained anger. "Your Honor, Mr. Rodriguez's claims are baseless and cruel. Emma's selective mutism began after she witnessed her father's violent outburst at the custody exchange 3 weeks ago. The child is terrified, not alienated." "That's a lie." Carlos Rodriguez shot to his feet, his face flushing red. "I never." "Mr. Rodriguez, sit down." Judge Morrison's gavel cracked against the sound block like a gunshot. "You will have your turn to speak. Control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt." Emma flinched at the sound, pressing Mr. Buttons against her chest so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her large brown eyes darted between her parents, her mother's face streaked with tears, her father's twisted with rage. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to melt into the floor. She wanted to be anywhere but here, watching the two people she loved most in the world destroy each other. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. She'd seen this pattern countless times, parents so consumed by their own hurt and anger that they forgot about the small human caught in the crossfire. But Emma's case haunted her. The girl's psychological evaluation had been heartbreaking. The therapist's report described severe anxiety, disrupted sleep patterns, and what the doctor termed protest through silence. Emma's only way to express that she couldn't take it anymore. "I want to speak with Emma directly," Judge Morrison announced, her voice softer now. "Alone in my chambers." Both attorneys began to object, citing protocol and procedure, but Morrison raised her hand. "This child hasn't spoken in 3 weeks. Standard protocol isn't working. I'm going to try something different." The judge descended from her bench and approached Emma slowly, as one might approach a frightened animal. She knelt down, her formal black robe pooling around her. "Emma, sweetheart, would you come with me? Just you and me, we'll talk in my office. There are some toys there and books. No lawyers, no recording, just us." Emma's eyes flickered toward her mother, seeking permission. Maria nodded encouragingly, though fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Slowly, Emma stood, still clutching Mr. Buttons, and followed the judge through the side door. Judge Morrison's chambers were warmer, more inviting than the stark courtroom. There were photos of her grandchildren on the desk, a small bookshelf filled with children's books she kept for situations like this, and a bowl of wrapped candies. She gestured to a comfortable chair and sat across from Emma, not behind her imposing desk. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," Morrison said gently. "But I need you to know something, Emma. I'm here to help you. Not your mom, not your dad, you. Can you nod if you understand?" Emma nodded, barely perceptible. "Good, I know this is really hard. I know your mom and dad are fighting, and that must be so scary. But here's what I want you to know: you didn't cause this. None of this is your fault. Do you believe me?" Emma's lower lip trembled, but she didn't respond. Judge Morrison sighed. She tried everything: art therapy, play therapy, different therapists. Nothing had broken through Emma's protective wall of silence. After 15 minutes of gentle attempts, Morrison led Emma back to the courtroom, her heart heavy with frustration and concern. As they entered through the side door, Morrison whispered to her clerk, "We need a breakthrough, Janet. This child is drowning, and I don't know how to throw her a lifeline." Outside in the courthouse hallway, K-9 officer Mike Henderson had just arrived with his partner, Rex, a 4-year-old German shepherd with intelligent brown eyes and a calm demeanor that made him perfect for police work. They were there for an unrelated case, a drug possession trial scheduled for that afternoon. Henderson had been a K-9 officer for 8 years, but Rex was special. The dog had an uncanny ability to sense human emotion, a quality that made him not just an excellent detection dog, but also perfect for community outreach programs. Rex sat obediently beside Henderson, his vest marked clearly with Police K-9 in bold letters. Several people passed by, some stopping to admire the handsome dog, others giving him a wide berth. Rex watched everyone with calm interest, his tail occasionally wagging when someone smiled at him. Neither Officer Henderson nor Rex had any idea that in just a few minutes, they would become the most unlikely heroes in a family court drama, and that a little girl's silence was about to be broken in the most extraordinary way. Inside courtroom 7B, the tension was suffocating. Judge Morrison called for a 15-minute recess, hoping that a break might ease the volatile atmosphere. Emma remained in her seat, staring at nothing, while her parents stood on opposite sides of the room, their attorneys huddled with them in urgent whispered conferences. The breakthrough everyone was praying for was just moments away, waiting in the hallway with 4 legs, a wagging tail, and the wisdom to understand what the adults had missed all along. The moment Judge Morrison announced the recess, Emma felt her chest tighten. The courtroom walls seemed to close in on her, the air growing thicker with every breath. Her mother reached for her hand, but Emma pulled away instinctively. She couldn't bear another touch, another worried look, another whispered "it's going to be okay" when nothing felt okay. Nothing had been okay for months. Without thinking, Emma slid off the bench and bolted toward the courtroom doors. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished marble floor as she pushed through the heavy wooden doors and stumbled into the hallway. Behind her, she heard her mother call out, "Emma, wait!" But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The courthouse hallway stretched before her like a canyon, high ceilings, imposing columns, and the echo of footsteps bouncing off cold walls. Emma ran blindly, Mr. Buttons clutched against her chest, tears blurring her vision. She just needed space, air, somewhere her parents' angry voices couldn't reach her. She rounded a corner and suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. There, sitting perfectly still beside a water fountain, was the most beautiful dog Emma had ever seen. The German shepherd's coat was a rich mixture of black and tan, his pointed ears alert and attentive. But it was his eyes that captured Emma, deep brown, gentle, and somehow understanding. The dog's gaze locked onto hers immediately, and something passed between them in that moment, something wordless and profound. Emma forgot to breathe. Rex had sensed the child's distress before he saw her. His training had taught him to detect drugs and track suspects, but his instincts went deeper than training. He could feel emotions radiating off humans like heat, fear, anger, sadness. This small human approaching him was drowning in all three. Officer Mike Henderson had been checking his phone, confirming the time for his afternoon testimony, when Rex's posture changed. The dog's ears perked forward, his body tensing with focus. Henderson looked up and saw the little girl standing frozen about 15 feet away, tears streaming down her face, clutching a ratty teddy bear like it was the only solid thing in her world. "Hey there," Henderson said softly, his voice trained to be calm and non-threatening. He'd done hundreds of school visits with Rex, knew how to talk to frightened kids, but something about this child's expression, the raw pain in her eyes, made his heart clench. Emma didn't respond. She just stared at Rex, her body trembling. "This is Rex," Henderson continued, keeping his voice gentle and steady. "He's a police dog, but he's really friendly. Would you like to meet him?" Still, Emma didn't move or speak, but her eyes never left Rex. Henderson recognized the signs. This wasn't just shyness. This was trauma. He'd seen it in domestic violence victims, in witnesses to horrible crimes, in children who'd lived through things no child should endure. He made a decision. "Rex, stay," he commanded, though Rex was already sitting perfectly. Then Henderson took several steps backward, creating space, making himself less imposing. "You can come closer if you want, or you can just look at him from there, whatever feels safe for you." Emma's fingers loosened slightly on Mr. Buttons. She took one small step forward, then another. Her sneakers made soft, scuffing sounds against the marble. 5 steps. 10. She moved like she was approaching something sacred and fragile, something that might vanish if she moved too quickly. Rex remained absolutely motionless. His training had taught him to stay, but something deeper was at work here. The dog seemed to understand that this moment required perfect stillness, infinite patience. His tail lay flat against the floor, his breathing slow, and even his eyes warm and accepting. When Emma was finally close enough to touch him, she hesitated. Her hand extended slowly, trembling, until her fingertips just barely grazed the soft fur on the top of Rex's head. The effect was instantaneous. Rex leaned gently into her palm, not aggressively, not demandingly, just a soft pressure that said, "I'm here. You're safe. I understand." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She placed her whole palm on Rex's head now, feeling the warmth of him, the solidness. Her other hand, still holding Mr. Buttons, slowly relaxed. For the first time in 3 weeks, the crushing weight on her chest eased just slightly. Henderson watched in amazement as Rex did something he'd never seen in 8 years of K9 work. The dog slowly, carefully, turned his head and rested his chin on Emma's small shoulder. Not jumping, not overwhelming her, just offering comfort in the most gentle way possible. Emma's arms wrapped around Rex's neck, and she buried her face in his fur. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, 3 weeks of trapped emotion finally finding release. Rex sat perfectly still, accepting her grief, absorbing her pain with the patience of a saint. Courthouse staff had begun to gather at a respectful distance. Janet, Judge Morrison's clerk, had followed Emma from the courtroom and now stood with her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. A security guard paused his rounds. 2 attorneys from an adjacent courtroom stopped mid-conversation. "How long has she been like this?" Henderson asked Janet quietly, careful not to disturb the moment. 3 weeks, Janet whispered back. "Complete selective mutism. Hasn't said a word since her parents' custody battle went nuclear. Judge Morrison's been trying everything." Henderson's jaw tightened. He'd seen what ugly divorces did to kids. He'd responded to enough domestic disturbance calls to know that the children were always the invisible casualties. He watched Emma clinging to Rex and felt a familiar anger at the adults who put their own battles ahead of their children's well-being. Maria Rodriguez appeared at the end of the hallway, Linda Washington beside her. Maria stopped when she saw Emma wrapped around the police dog, her hand flying to her mouth. Linda touched her arm gently, holding her back. "Let her have this moment," the attorney whispered. "Whatever this is, she needs it." Carlos Rodriguez emerged from the courtroom next, his attorney Marcus Chen trailing behind. When Carlos saw his daughter embracing the dog, his face softened for the first time that day. For just a moment, the anger drained away, replaced by what looked like genuine concern and confusion. Judge Morrison was the last to arrive, still wearing her black robe. She stood beside Janet, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. In 30 years, she'd learned to recognize pivotal moments, the instances where something shifted, where a case turned on an unexpected axis. This was one of those moments. "Who's the officer?" Morrison asked Janet quietly. "Mike Henderson, Your Honor, K-9 unit. He's here for the Morrison drug case this afternoon." "And the dog?" "Rex, been with the department for 4 years. Henderson says he's the best detection dog they've ever had." Judge Morrison filed that information away, her mind already working. Emma finally pulled back from Rex, her face blotchy and tear-stained, but somehow lighter than it had been in weeks. She looked up at Officer Henderson with red-rimmed eyes that held a question she couldn't voice. "Rex likes you," Henderson said with a warm smile. "I can tell. He doesn't give his special hugs to just anyone." Emma's lips trembled, almost forming words, but nothing came out. She looked back at Rex, and the dog's tail began to wag slowly, a gentle rhythm that seemed to say it's okay. "Take your time." "We have to go back inside soon," Janet said gently, stepping forward. "Court's going to resume in a few minutes, honey." Emma's face fell, panic flashing in her eyes. She grabbed Rex's fur more tightly, and the dog whined softly, a sound of concern, not distress. "Tell you what," Henderson said, making another impulsive decision. "Would it be okay if Rex and I sit in the hallway outside the courtroom? That way, when you need another break, he'll be right there. Would that help?" Emma looked at Henderson with such desperate hope that it broke his heart. She nodded, small, quick, grateful. "Then that's what we'll do," he promised. Judge Morrison watched this exchange with growing interest. She'd been presiding over family court long enough to know that breakthroughs came in unexpected forms. Maybe this dog, this officer, this chance encounter was exactly what Emma needed. As Janet gently guided Emma back toward the courtroom, the little girl looked over her shoulder at Rex 3 times. Each time, the dog was watching her, tail still wagging that slow, reassuring rhythm. Emma paused at the courtroom door, her hand on the frame. She turned back one more time to look at Rex, and something shifted in her expression, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around herself. No one knew it yet, but in just a few minutes that crack would break wide open, and 2 words would change everything. Judge Morrison settled back into her high-backed leather chair, the weight of her robe suddenly feeling heavier than usual. She glanced at Emma, who had returned to her seat beside her mother, but the child's entire body was angled toward the courtroom doors. Emma's eyes remained fixed on that hallway, on the police dog waiting just beyond the walls. "Let the record show we're back in session," Morrison announced, nodding to the court reporter. "Before we continue with testimony, I'd like to address the child's well-being directly." Marcus Chen stood, his expensive leather briefcase clicking open. "Your Honor, my client would like to present evidence of the mother's interference with his parenting time. We have text messages, witness statements." "Mr. Chen," Judge Morrison interrupted, her patience wearing thin, "I've read your exhibits. What I haven't heard is anything from the most important person in this room." She looked directly at Emma. "Emma, sweetheart, I know talking is hard right now, but I need to understand what you're feeling. Can you help me understand?" Emma's grip on Mr. Buttons tightened. Her lips pressed into a thin line. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. Maria Rodriguez reached for her daughter's hand, but Emma pulled away, her eyes still locked on those courtroom doors. She could feel Rex out there. Somehow, knowing he was close made her chest feel less tight, made the air slightly easier to breathe. "Your Honor," Linda Washington rose, her voice measured but firm. "Perhaps we could revisit the Guardian ad litem's recommendation. Dr. Phillips spent considerable time with Emma and—" "I've read Dr. Phillips' report," Morrison cut in. "Extensively, but reports and evaluations can only tell us so much. I need to hear from Emma herself, even if—" A loud buzz interrupted her. The bailiff's radio crackled with static. "Sorry, Your Honor," he muttered, fumbling to silence it. The sudden noise startled Emma. She jumped in her seat, and before anyone could stop her, she bolted from the bench again. This time, she didn't run blindly. She had a destination. "Emma," Maria called out, half rising from her seat. "Let her go," Judge Morrison said quietly, something in her gut telling her to wait, to watch, to see where this moment led. Emma burst through the courtroom doors into the hallway. Officer Henderson was leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone, while Rex lay calmly beside him. The moment the doors opened, Rex's head lifted, ears perking forward. His tail began that slow, steady wag. Emma walked straight to the dog and dropped to her knees beside him. Her small hands found his fur, and she pressed her forehead against his neck, breathing in his dog smell, earthy and clean and somehow safe. Rex turned his head and gently licked her ear, making her shoulders relax. Henderson knelt down beside them. "Rough in there, huh?" he said softly. Emma nodded against Rex's fur. "I get it," Henderson continued. "Sometimes the grown-ups forget that all their talking and arguing isn't about papers and lawyers. It's about you, and that's a lot of pressure for someone your size to carry." Emma pulled back slightly and looked at Rex, really looked at him. The dog gazed back with those knowing brown eyes, and something clicked in Emma's mind. A connection, a realization, a truth she'd been unable to articulate until this very moment. Behind her, the courtroom doors opened again. Judge Morrison stepped into the hallway, followed by both attorneys, both parents, the bailiff, and Janet. They formed a semicircle at a respectful distance, all watching Emma and the police dog. Emma stood up slowly, her hand resting on Rex's head. She looked at her mother's tear-streaked face, at her father's conflicted expression, at the judge who'd been trying so hard to help her. Then she looked back down at Rex. The dog stood beside her, solid and calm. His presence gave her something she hadn't felt in months: courage. Emma's hand rose, her finger extending to point directly at Rex. The gesture was clear, deliberate, impossible to ignore. The hallway fell into absolute silence. Even the distant sounds of the courthouse, phones ringing, footsteps echoing, voices murmuring, seemed to fade away. Emma's lips parted. Her throat worked, pushing past 3 weeks of self-imposed silence, past the fear and pain and overwhelming confusion. "Like Rex," she whispered. The words were so soft that for a moment no one was certain they'd actually heard them. Maria gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Carlos froze mid-step. Judge Morrison's eyes widened. "Emma," Maria breathed, taking a tentative step forward. "Baby, did you just—" "Like Rex," Emma said again, louder this time, her voice cracking from disuse but growing stronger with each syllable. Judge Morrison moved quickly, her robe billowing behind her as she approached Emma and knelt down to her level. Her heart was pounding. This was the breakthrough they'd all been praying for. "Emma, that's wonderful that you're talking," Morrison said gently, keeping her voice calm despite her racing pulse. "Can you tell me what you mean? What about Rex?" Emma looked at the judge, then at Rex, then back at the judge. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop now. The words had started and they needed to come out. "I want to be like Rex," Emma said, her voice trembling but clear. Carlos stepped forward, confusion written across his face. "Honey, I don't understand. You want to be like a dog." Emma shook her head vigorously, frustrated that they weren't getting it. She pointed at Rex again, more insistently this time. Rex goes home with Officer Mike. Every night. Every single night. Officer Henderson's eyes widened as he began to understand what the child was trying to say. Emma continued, the words tumbling out faster now, years of confusion and pain finally finding voice. Rex knows where he sleeps. He knows where his food bowl is. He knows where his toys are. He has one home, one place where he belongs. The hallway was so quiet that Emma's voice seemed to echo off the marble walls. I have two homes, Emma said, and now the tears were flowing freely down her cheeks. 2 bedrooms, 2 toothbrushes, 2 sets of toys, 2 of everything. Mom's house on Monday and Tuesday and every other weekend. Dad's house on Wednesday and Thursday and the other weekends. Her voice rose, taking on a desperate edge. I don't know where I belong anymore. I don't know which house is home. Maria let out a sob and sank against the wall. Carlos stood frozen, his face draining of color. Emma wasn't finished. I'm tired, she said, her small voice carrying the exhaustion of months of emotional turmoil. I'm tired of packing my backpack every 2 days. I'm tired of forgetting my homework at the wrong house. I'm tired of having 2 birthday parties and 2 Christmases and 2 of everything except what I really want. What do you want, sweetheart? Judge Morrison asked gently, though she was already beginning to understand. Emma looked at Rex again, and the dog seemed to sense the importance of this moment. He sat perfectly still beside her, his presence a solid anchor in her storm of emotions. Officer Mike told me something while we were out here, Emma said, her hand finding Rex's fur again, drawing strength from it. He said Rex used to be sad, really, really sad. Henderson nodded, his throat tight. That's right. Rex was in shelters before he came to me. Different shelters, different places, always moving. And he was sad because he didn't have a home, Emma continued, looking at her parents now with an intensity that made them both flinch. He didn't know where he belonged. He was scared all the time, just like me. The parallel was devastatingly clear. Every adult in that hallway felt the impact of Emma's words like a physical blow. But then Officer Mike adopted him, Emma said, and now there was something almost pleading in her voice. And Rex got one home, and he's not sad anymore. He's happy. He knows where he belongs. She paused, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I want that. I want to know where I belong. Judge Morrison felt tears pricking at her own eyes. In 30 years of family court, she'd heard thousands of testimonies, read countless psychological evaluations, listened to expert witnesses analyze children's needs with clinical precision. But never had she heard a child articulate their pain so clearly, so perfectly, using nothing more than a police dog as a metaphor. Emma looked directly at the judge now, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than any shout could have. Please don't make me be sad like Rex was. Please give me one home. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus Chen, the father's attorney who'd been so confident minutes ago, stood with his mouth slightly open, his prepared arguments suddenly seeming hollow and meaningless. Linda Washington had tears streaming down her face. Carlos Rodriguez sank to his knees right there in the courthouse hallway, his face crumbling. Oh God, Emma, I didn't know, I didn't, his voice broke. Maria was crying so hard she could barely breathe, but she made no move toward Emma, understanding somehow that this moment belonged to her daughter alone. Judge Morrison stood slowly, her mind racing. Emma's words had done something that months of litigation couldn't. They'd cut through all the legal maneuvering, all the accusations and counter-accusations, all the adult agendas, and exposed the simple, brutal truth at the heart of this case. This child was drowning in divided loyalty, in constant transitions, in being forced to live 2 separate lives. And she'd used a rescue dog to explain what no therapist had been able to articulate quite so clearly. Thank you, Emma, Judge Morrison said quietly. Thank you for finding the courage to tell us what you need. She looked at both parents, her expression stern. I'm calling an immediate recess. We're going to reconvene in 1 hour. Mr. Rodriguez, Ms. Rodriguez, you will both use this time to think very carefully about what your daughter just said." She turned to Henderson. "Officer, would you and Rex be willing to stay for a while longer? I may need to speak with you." Henderson looked at Emma, then at Rex, then back at the judge. "We'll stay as long as you need us, Your Honor." Emma collapsed against Rex one more time, exhausted from finally releasing the truth she'd been carrying for so long. The dog leaned into her, offering silent support, while in that courthouse hallway, the entire trajectory of a custody case, and possibly family law itself, had just shifted on its axis. All because of 2 words. Like Rex, Judge Morrison's private chambers had never felt so crowded. Emma sat in the same comfortable chair from earlier, but this time Rex lay at her feet, his head resting on her sneakers. Officer Henderson stood near the window, his arms crossed, while the judge sat across from Emma, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. "Emma," Morrison began softly, "you've been so brave today. I know that took a lot of courage. Can you tell me more about what you've been feeling, about having 2 homes?" Emma's fingers twisted in Rex's fur. The dog didn't move, just breathed steadily beneath her touch. She'd been silent for so long that the words felt strange in her mouth, but now that she'd started, she couldn't seem to stop. "Every Sunday night I get a stomach ache," Emma said, her voice small but clear. "Because I know I have to pack my backpack again. I have to remember my school uniform, my homework, my permission slips, my library books. And I always forget something. Always." Judge Morrison nodded encouragingly. "That sounds really stressful." "Last month I forgot my science project at Mom's house," Emma continued, her voice cracking. "And it was due at Dad's house on Wednesday. Dad got so mad. He said Mom did it on purpose, that she hid it so I'd get a bad grade and it would be his fault." Tears welled up in her eyes. "But Mom didn't hide it. I just forgot. I forget things all the time now because my brain is too full of remembering which house has what." Henderson shifted uncomfortably by the window. He'd seen the damage that adult conflict inflicted on children in his years on the force, but hearing it articulated so clearly by someone so young hit differently. "My teacher, Mrs. Patterson, she asks me where my homework is," Emma went on, the words spilling out faster now. "And sometimes I don't know. I can picture it, I can see it in my mind, but I don't know if it's at the kitchen table at Mom's house or on my desk at Dad's house. So I just say I forgot and she gives me a disappointed look, and I want to explain but I can't because if I tell her about the 2 houses, she'll ask questions, and I don't want everyone at school to know." Judge Morrison's heart clenched. "What don't you want them to know, sweetheart?" "That my family is broken," Emma whispered. "That I'm the kid who goes back and forth. Jamie Miller's parents got divorced last year and everyone talks about it. They say it's sad. They ask him questions. I don't want to be the sad kid everyone whispers about." The judge glanced at Henderson, who was staring out the window, his jaw tight. Morrison knew he was thinking the same thing she was. This level of anxiety and shame wasn't normal for an 8-year-old. This was trauma. "Tell me about when you switch houses," Morrison prompted gently. "What's that like?" Emma's hand stilled in Rex's fur. "Dad picks me up from Mom's house on Wednesday after school. They don't talk to each other. Mom walks me to the car and puts my backpack in, and Dad doesn't even look at her. He just says, 'Get in, Emma,' really quick, like we need to escape. And Mom stands on the porch watching us drive away, and she's always crying, but she tries to hide it." "And how does that make you feel?" "Like it's my fault," Emma said simply. "Like if I wasn't there, they wouldn't have to see each other and be sad and angry all the time." Morrison wrote something in her notepad, her handwriting sharp with urgency. This child was carrying guilt that no 8-year-old should bear. "When I'm at Dad's house, he asks me lots of questions," Emma continued, her voice taking on a tired, mechanical quality. "He asks what Mom said about him. He asks if Mom's boyfriend stays over. He asks if I like it better at Mom's house. And I don't know what to say because if I say the wrong thing, he gets quiet and sad, and I know I hurt his feelings. What about when you're at your mom's house? Morrison asked. Mom doesn't ask as many questions, but she cries a lot. She tries to hide it, but I hear her at night on the phone with Aunt Rosa. She says Dad is trying to take me away from her. She says she's scared. And then I'm scared too, because what if one day I go to Dad's house and Mom isn't there when I come back? Rex shifted slightly, pressing his body more firmly against Emma's legs. The dog seemed to sense the rising anxiety in the room. Emma, do you love your dad? Judge Morrison asked, knowing she had to ask even though the answer was obvious. Yes, Emma said immediately, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I love Dad so much. He makes me pancakes with chocolate chips, and he knows all the words to my favorite songs, and he gives the best piggyback rides. But what, honey? But when I'm with Dad, I miss Mom. And when I'm with Mom, I miss Dad. And I never feel like I'm all the way anywhere. I'm always half missing the other person. Emma's voice rose with frustration. And they both keep asking me where I want to live like I'm supposed to choose, but how can I choose? If I say Mom, Dad will be heartbroken. If I say Dad, Mom will cry for days. So I just don't say anything, and everyone gets mad at me for not talking. The words hung in the air like a confession. Judge Morrison sat back, the full picture finally crystal clear. This child had been traumatized into silence not by abuse or neglect, but by the impossible burden of managing her parents' emotions while trying to maintain her own sanity. Is that why you stopped talking? Morrison asked softly. Because you didn't know what to say anymore. Emma nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. If I don't talk, I can't say the wrong thing. I can't hurt anyone's feelings. I can't make anyone mad. Officer Henderson turned from the window, unable to stay silent any longer. Your Honor, if I may. Morrison nodded. Henderson approached Emma's chair and knelt down, putting himself at her eye level. Emma, can I tell you about Rex? About what happened before he came to live with me? Emma looked at him with red-rimmed eyes and nodded. Rex was born at a breeding facility in Pennsylvania, Henderson began. When he was 8 weeks old, just a puppy, he was sold to a family who thought it would be cool to have a German Shepherd. But they lived in an apartment and Rex got too big, too energetic. So after 6 months, they gave him to a shelter. Emma's eyes widened. They gave him away. They did, and the shelter tried to find him a new home, but Rex was anxious by then. He didn't trust people. He'd been moved once already and it confused him, so he was harder to adopt. After 3 months, the shelter was overcrowded, so they transferred him to another shelter 2 hours away. That's terrible, Emma whispered. It gets worse, Henderson said gently. That shelter kept him for 2 months, then transferred him to a third shelter, then a fourth. Each time, Rex got more anxious, more withdrawn. He didn't know where he belonged. He didn't know who to trust. He stopped eating properly. He stopped playing. He just shut down. Emma's hand tightened in Rex's fur. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor, as if he knew he was being talked about. By the time I met Rex, he'd been in 4 different shelters in 6 months, Henderson continued. The K-9 trainer almost didn't accept him into the program because he was so anxious and unpredictable. But I saw something in him. I saw a dog who wasn't broken, just confused. He didn't need training. He needed consistency. He needed to know where home was. And you gave him a home, Emma said, understanding flooding her eyes. I did, and you know what happened, Henderson smiled. For the first 3 weeks, Rex wouldn't relax. He'd sleep by the door like he was waiting for someone to come take him away again. He wouldn't settle in. He was constantly on edge. Like me, Emma whispered. I sleep with my backpack beside my bed, even at Mom's house, even at Dad's house, just in case. The parallel was so perfect, so painful, that Judge Morrison had to look away for a moment to compose herself. But after those 3 weeks, Henderson continued, Rex realized something. He realized he wasn't going anywhere. This was home. I was his person. And once he understood that, once he felt safe, he transformed. He became the amazing dog you see today, confident, happy, the best detection dog in the entire department. Emma looked down at Rex with new understanding. You were sad like me, but now you're happy. Rex's tail wagged harder, as if confirming her statement. Emma, Judge Morrison said, leaning forward again, when you said you wanted to be like Rex, you meant you want one home, one place where you know you belong. Is that right? Yes, Emma said firmly. I don't want to hurt Dad's feelings and I don't want Mom to cry, but I can't live like this anymore. I'm tired all the time. My stomach hurts all the time. I can't remember things at school, and I can't talk because I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing. She paused, gathering courage. Rex gets to live with Officer Mike all the time. He knows that's his home. He's not confused. Why can't I have that? You can, Morrison said decisively. You absolutely can, and I'm going to make sure of it. She stood, her mind already racing through legal precedents, case law, child psychology research. Emma had just articulated what dozens of studies had proven, that children of divorce needed stability more than they needed perfectly equal time with each parent, that constant transitions created anxiety and academic problems, that forcing children to shuttle between homes could be more damaging than giving them one primary residence with generous visitation to the other parent. Officer Henderson, Morrison said, I'm going to need you to testify about Rex's history, about what you just told Emma. Would you be willing to do that? Henderson looked surprised but nodded immediately. Absolutely, Your Honor. Good, Morrison turned to Emma. Sweetheart, I want you to know something. What you did today, finding your voice, telling us what you need, that was incredibly brave. And I promise you I'm going to listen. The adults in your life forgot to listen to you, but I won't make that mistake. Emma looked up at the judge with hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in weeks. Will I get to be like Rex? Will I get one home? I'm going to do everything in my power to make that happen, Morrison promised. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, okay? Emma nodded. If you could choose, and I know it's hard, but if you had to have one primary home, where would it be? With Mom or Dad? The question hung in the air. Emma looked at Rex, at Officer Henderson, then back at Judge Morrison. When she spoke, her voice was small but certain. Mom's house, because, she swallowed hard, because Dad has a temper. He yells a lot. He's never hit me or Mom, but he punches walls sometimes and it scares me. And I love him, I really do, but I don't feel safe when he's angry. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. This was the piece of information she'd been waiting for, the confirmation of what she'd suspected from the case file. Thank you for telling me that, Emma. That took tremendous courage. As Morrison opened the door to return to the courtroom, Emma called out one more time. Judge Morrison. Yes, sweetheart. Can Rex come with me? When you tell my parents, I feel braver when he's there. Morrison looked at Henderson, who nodded. Rex can absolutely be there, Morrison said. After all, he started this whole thing. He should be there to see it through. In the hallway outside, both parents waited with their attorneys, neither knowing that their daughter had just completely changed the trajectory of their case, and that a rescue dog had become the most unlikely expert witness in family court history. The courtroom felt different when they reconvened. The air was charged with anticipation, and for the first time since the proceedings had begun, everyone seemed focused on the same thing, not winning, not being right, but understanding what Emma truly needed. Judge Morrison took her seat, her expression grave and determined. Emma sat in the front row with her mother, but this time Rex lay on the floor beside her, his official police vest making him look both professional and comforting. Officer Henderson stood near the back, hands clasped behind him, waiting. This court is back in session, Morrison announced, her gavel falling with a decisive crack. Before we continue with the custody arguments, I'm calling an unusual witness. Officer Mike Henderson, please come forward. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, Marcus Chen, the father's attorney, shot to his feet. "Your Honor, I object. Officer Henderson isn't on any witness list. We had no notice that." "Your objection is noted and overruled," Morrison said coolly. "This is family court, Mr. Chen, not criminal court. I have wide latitude in determining what testimony serves the best interests of the child, and I've determined that Officer Henderson's testimony is crucial. Sit down." Chen sat, but his jaw was clenched with frustration. Carlos leaned over, whispering urgently to his attorney, but Chen just shook his head. There was nothing to be done. Henderson walked to the witness stand, his police uniform crisp and professional. He was sworn in, placed his hand on the Bible, and took his seat. Rex watched from the floor, his ears perked with interest, as if he understood the importance of this moment. "Officer Henderson," Judge Morrison began, "please tell the court about your experience with K-9 units. How long have you been working with police dogs?" "8 years, Your Honor," Henderson replied, his voice steady and clear. "I've worked with 3 dogs during that time, but Rex has been my partner for the past 4 years." "And before Rex came to you, what was his history?" Henderson took a breath and launched into the story he'd told Emma, but this time with more detail. Rex was born at a breeding facility and sold to a family as a pet when he was 8 weeks old. That family wasn't prepared for the energy and needs of a German Shepherd. When Rex was 6 months old, still essentially a puppy, they surrendered him to a county animal shelter. Maria Rodriguez was leaning forward, listening intently. Even Carlos had stopped whispering to his attorney. "That shelter held him for 3 months, Henderson continued. "During that time, Rex became increasingly anxious. He'd been bonded with the family that raised him, and suddenly he was in a cage, surrounded by barking dogs, with strangers handling him. When no one adopted him, the shelter transferred him to another facility to make room for incoming animals." "What effect did that transfer have on Rex?" Morrison asked. "According to the records I received when I adopted him, Rex's behavior deteriorated significantly. He became withdrawn, stopped eating regularly, and showed signs of depression. The second shelter kept him for 2 months before transferring him to a 3rd facility, then a 4th. Henderson's voice grew heavier with each shelter he named. By the time Rex arrived at the 4th shelter, the one that contacted the K-9 program, he'd been moved 4 times in 6 months. He was 8 months old, which should be a prime time for training and socialization, but instead he was shut down emotionally. He wouldn't make eye contact. He flinched when people approached. He had no trust left. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, tears leaking from beneath her lashes. She knew exactly how Rex had felt. "What happened when you first met Rex?" Judge Morrison asked. Henderson's expression softened. "The K-9 program director almost rejected him. She said he was too damaged, too anxious to be reliable in police work. But I'd read his file and I saw the pattern. Rex wasn't aggressive or vicious. He was confused and scared. He didn't know where he belonged. Every time he'd started to settle somewhere, he'd been uprooted and moved again." "So you decided to adopt him?" "I did, but it wasn't easy at first." Henderson leaned forward, his voice taking on a passionate edge. "For the first 3 weeks, Rex wouldn't relax in my home. He slept by the front door every single night like he was waiting for someone to come take him away again. He wouldn't play with toys because he knew from experience that he couldn't keep them. Every shelter had different toys, and nothing was really his. He ate his food too fast, like he was afraid it would disappear." Linda Washington, Maria's attorney, was writing furiously in her notepad. She could see exactly where this testimony was going. "Officer Henderson," Morrison said, "in your professional opinion, what was the root cause of Rex's behavioral problems?" "Lack of stability," Henderson said without hesitation. "Rex is an intelligent, loyal, capable dog, but intelligence doesn't help when your entire world keeps changing. He needed consistency. He needed to know where home was, who his person was, what the rules were. He needed to feel safe enough to settle in." And when did that change happen? Henderson smiled slightly. About a month in, I noticed Rex sleeping in his dog bed instead of by the door. Small thing, but huge. It meant he was starting to believe this was permanent. From there, it was like watching a completely different dog emerge. He started playing. His appetite normalized. He began to trust me, to look to me for guidance. Within 3 months, he was excelling in K9 training. What makes Rex such an effective police dog now? Morrison asked. Confidence, Henderson replied immediately. Rex knows his job because he knows his home base. When we finish a shift, he knows exactly where we're going home. My home. His home. He has his spot on the couch, his food bowls in the same place every day, his toys in the same basket. That consistency allows him to focus on his work instead of worrying about where he'll sleep that night. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Every word Henderson spoke was landing exactly as Judge Morrison had intended. Officer Henderson, are you familiar with the concept of attachment theory in psychology? Marcus Chen stood again. Objection, Your Honor. Officer Henderson isn't qualified to testify about psychology. I'm not asking for a psychological diagnosis, Morrison said sharply. I'm asking about his practical experience. Overruled. Answer the question, officer. Henderson nodded. I've had to learn about it for K9 work. Attachment theory is about the bonds between individuals and their caregivers. For dogs, it's about bonding with their handler. The theory says that consistent, reliable care creates secure attachment. Inconsistent care, being moved around, not knowing who to trust, creates anxious attachment. And Rex had anxious attachment when you got him. Severely. He couldn't form a secure bond because he'd been betrayed too many times. Every person he'd started to trust had given him up. Emma let out a small sob. Maria wrapped her arm around her daughter's shoulders, her own face wet with tears. How does this relate to children? Morrison asked, though everyone in the room already knew the answer. Dogs and kids aren't the same, Henderson acknowledged, but the basic needs are similar. Both need stability. Both need to know where they belong. Both need consistent caregivers who don't suddenly disappear. He paused, choosing his words carefully. In K9 training, we learned that you can't split a dog's time between 2 handlers and expect them to perform well. The dog gets confused about who to look to for commands, who to protect, where home is. It doesn't mean one handler is better than the other. It just means the dog needs clarity. Carlos Rodriguez had gone pale. He was finally understanding what his insistence on 50-50 custody had been doing to his daughter. Officer Henderson, Judge Morrison said, what would have happened if, instead of giving Rex one permanent home with you, we had split his time? Say 3 days with you, 4 days with another officer, constantly switching. Henderson didn't hesitate. He would have failed out of the program. Guaranteed. Rex needed to bond with one person, have one home base to become the dog he is today. If we'd split his time, he'd still be anxious, unfocused, unable to do his job. He might even have become aggressive out of fear and confusion. But he could still see other people, visit other places. Absolutely. Rex comes to the station every day, works with other officers, does school visits, community events. He's well socialized. But at the end of every day, he knows exactly where he's going, home with me. That certainty is what allows him to be confident in all those other situations. Judge Morrison turned to face the courtroom, her expression stern. Let me make sure I understand your testimony, officer. You're saying that Rex, an intelligent and loyal dog, was transformed from anxious and withdrawn to confident and successful by one simple thing: having one stable home with one primary caregiver, even though he regularly saw and worked with other people. Yes, Your Honor, that's exactly what I'm saying. Morrison let the words hang in the air for a long moment. Then she looked directly at Carlos Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez, do you love your daughter? Carlos stood, his voice thick with emotion. More than anything in this world. Then I want you to look at Rex, Morrison commanded. Really look at him." Carlos turned his gaze to the German shepherd lying calmly beside Emma. The dog's brown eyes were clear and peaceful, his body relaxed. He was the picture of a well-adjusted, confident animal. That dog was a traumatized mess 6 months into his life because he was bounced between homes, Morrison said, her voice carrying the weight of judgment. He had people who cared for him at each shelter. They fed him, walked him, kept him safe. But it wasn't enough because he had no stability, no anchor, no home. She turned to Maria. "Ms. Rodriguez, I want you to understand something too. This isn't about you being a better parent than Mr. Rodriguez. This isn't about winning or losing." Then Morrison addressed both parents simultaneously. "This is about Emma. Your daughter just told us, using a police dog as her example, that she's drowning in divided loyalty. She's living out of a backpack. She can't remember where her homework is. She's so afraid of hurting one of your feelings that she stopped talking entirely for 3 weeks." Emma was crying openly now, but Rex had shifted position. He'd placed his head in her lap, offering comfort the way he'd been trained to do with distressed individuals. "Officer Henderson," Morrison said, returning her attention to the witness stand. "One final question. If you had to choose between giving Rex equal time with 2 different handlers, or giving him a primary home with 1 handler and regular, consistent visitation with another, which would be better for Rex's well-being?" "Primary home with 1 handler, regular visitation with the other," Henderson said without hesitation. "It's not even close. The dog needs an anchor." "Thank you, Officer Henderson. You may step down." As Henderson returned to his seat, Judge Morrison surveyed the courtroom. Both attorneys looked shell-shocked. Carlos was crying silently. Maria looked hopeful but terrified. And Emma sat with her hand buried in Rex's fur, finally believing that maybe, just maybe, someone was actually listening to her. "We're going to take a 30-minute recess," Morrison announced. "When we return, I'm going to issue my ruling. Mr. Rodriguez, Ms. Rodriguez, I suggest you use this time wisely. Think about what your daughter needs, not what you want. Think about Rex and what Emma was trying to tell you when she pointed at him and said, 'like Rex.'" Her gavel fell, and the courtroom erupted in whispered conversations. But Emma just sat quietly with Rex, finally feeling like she'd been heard, not in spite of the police dog, but because of him. Sometimes the most profound truths come from the most unexpected teachers. And today, a rescue dog had taught an entire courtroom about what children really need to thrive. The 30-minute recess felt like an eternity. In the courthouse hallway, Carlos Rodriguez sat on a wooden bench with his head in his hands, his attorney standing awkwardly beside him. Across the hall, Maria paced nervously while Linda Washington spoke to her in hushed, urgent tones. Between them, creating an invisible divide, was the weight of what they'd just heard. Emma remained in the courtroom with Rex and Officer Henderson. Judge Morrison had given special permission for them to stay, recognizing that the child felt safest with the dog nearby. Emma sat on the floor, her back against the front bench, with Rex's large head resting on her knees. "Is the judge going to fix it?" Emma asked Henderson quietly. "Is she going to make it so I have 1 home?" Henderson knelt beside her, his voice gentle but honest. "Judge Morrison is one of the good ones, Emma. She's really listening to you, but I can't promise what she'll decide. What I can promise is that what you did today, finding your voice, telling the truth, that took more courage than most adults ever show." "I was scared," Emma admitted. "I'm still scared. What if Dad hates me? What if he thinks I don't love him anymore?" "Real love isn't about keeping score of how many days you spend together," Henderson said. "It's about wanting the best for someone even when it's hard. If your dad really loves you, and I believe he does, he'll understand that you need stability." Through the courtroom windows, they could see Carlos still sitting with his head down. He looked broken, defeated, but also, perhaps, finally understanding. Inside Judge Morrison's chambers, she was reviewing case law with her clerk Janet. Legal precedents stacked up on her desk, custody cases from across the country, psychological studies about children of divorce, research on the impact of frequent transitions on childhood development. "You know this is going to be controversial," Janet said, marking a passage in one of the journals. "Fathers' rights groups will say you're biased toward mothers." "This isn't about mothers versus fathers," Morrison replied firmly. "It's about stability versus chaos. If the situation were reversed, if Emma had said she felt safer with her father, I'd rule the same way." She closed the file she'd been reading. For too long, family courts have been so focused on being fair to parents that we've forgotten to ask what's actually good for children. "The 50-50 split has become the default," Janet agreed. "Everyone assumes equal time means equal love." "But it doesn't," Morrison said. "Not when the child is living in a constant state of transition. Not when they can't focus on school because they're managing two households. Not when they stop talking because they're afraid of showing preference." She stood, straightening her robe. "Emma used a dog to explain what trained psychologists haven't been able to convince courts of for years. Children need roots, not just wings." When the bailiff announced that court was back in session, the tension in the room was palpable. Carlos and Maria took their seats on opposite sides of the aisle. Emma returned to the front row, with Rex lying at her feet. Officer Henderson sat in the back, ready to leave if dismissed but hoping to see this through. Judge Morrison entered and everyone rose. When she sat, her expression was grave but certain, the look of someone who'd made a difficult decision and was prepared to stand by it. "Be seated," she commanded. The rustling of bodies settling into chairs seemed unusually loud. "I've spent the last 30 minutes reviewing this case in light of Emma's testimony and Officer Henderson's expert witness account. I've also reviewed the psychological evaluation, the Guardian ad litem report, and the history of this custody dispute." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over the courtroom. "For the past 6 months, this court has been attempting to craft a custody arrangement that gives both parents equal time with Emma. The current order splits the week almost evenly. Mother has Monday, Tuesday, and every other weekend. Father has Wednesday, Thursday, and alternating weekends. On paper, this seems fair. It seems equitable. It seems like Solomon splitting the baby." Marcus Chen shifted in his seat, sensing where this was going but unable to stop it. "But here's what we forgot to consider," Morrison continued, her voice gaining strength. "Emma isn't a possession to be divided equally. She's a child who needs stability, consistency, and one place to call home. Officer Henderson's testimony about Rex wasn't just a touching story. It was a roadmap for what this child has been trying to tell us all along." Carlos closed his eyes, tears sliding down his cheeks. Emma's words were simple but profound. "I want to be like Rex," Morrison said. "She wants one home. One bedroom where her things stay, one school routine that doesn't require her to remember which parent's house holds which textbook, one stable base from which she can build her life." The judge looked directly at both parents now. "This doesn't mean one of you is a better parent. This doesn't mean one of you loves her less. What it means is that your daughter, your beautiful, intelligent, brave daughter, has been sacrificed on the altar of fairness, and it's been destroying her." Maria let out a quiet sob. Carlos gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. "Therefore, I'm issuing a ruling that deviates significantly from standard joint custody arrangements," Morrison announced. "Emma Rodriguez will have one primary residence, with her mother, Maria Rodriguez." Marcus Chen half rose from his seat, but Judge Morrison's raised hand stopped him. "Let me finish, Mr. Chen. Mr. Rodriguez will have generous and structured parenting time, but it will be consistent and predictable. Specifically, every other weekend from Friday after school until Sunday evening, and every Wednesday for dinner from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Additionally, Mr. Rodriguez will have 2 weeks during summer vacation, alternating major holidays, and a weekly video call on the evenings when he doesn't have in-person time." Your Honor, I must object, Chen began. Your objection is noted, Morrison said sharply. But I'm not finished. Both parents are hereby ordered to attend co-parenting therapy. Separately at first, together, once the therapist determines you're ready. You will learn to communicate about Emma's needs without conflict. She fixed both Carlos and Maria with a stern look. You are also ordered to never, and I mean never, speak negatively about the other parent in Emma's presence. You will not pump her for information. You will not use her as a messenger. You will not make her feel guilty for loving both of you. If either of you violates this order, I will not hesitate to modify custody further. The courtroom was absolutely silent, except for the sound of the court reporter's fingers on her stenography machine. Furthermore, Morrison continued, I'm ordering that Emma continue weekly therapy to process the trauma she's experienced during this custody battle. And I'm appointing a child advocate to check in with Emma monthly for the next 6 months to ensure this arrangement is serving her needs. Judge Morrison's voice softened slightly as she looked at Emma. Emma, what you did today was incredibly brave. You told us what you needed using words that adults could finally understand. I want you to know that I'm listening to you. This arrangement isn't about your parents, it's about you. Emma nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of fear or confusion. They were tears of relief. Mr. Rodriguez, Morrison said, turning her attention to Carlos. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you love your daughter and want to spend as much time with her as possible. But I'm asking you to think about what Officer Henderson told us. Rex thrives because he has one home, one anchor. That doesn't mean he loves Officer Henderson more than he loves the other officers he sees every day. It means he knows where he belongs, and that security allows him to be confident everywhere else. Carlos wiped his eyes and nodded slowly. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse with emotion. I understand, Your Honor. I don't like it, but I understand. That's a start, Morrison said. And here's what I want you to understand most of all. This ruling is based on Emma's statement that she doesn't feel safe when you're angry. She specifically mentioned that you punch walls when you're upset. Carlos's face crumpled. I've never hurt her. I would never. I believe you wouldn't intentionally hurt her, Morrison interrupted. But Emma is hurt by your anger nonetheless, which is why I'm also ordering you to attend anger management counseling. 6 months, minimum. If you can demonstrate to this court that you've addressed your anger issues, and if Emma feels comfortable with it, we can revisit increasing your parenting time. It was both a punishment and a lifeline, acknowledgement of the problem and a path toward fixing it. Your Honor, Carlos said, standing on shaky legs, may I say something to Emma? Morrison hesitated, then nodded. Keep it brief and keep it appropriate. Carlos turned to face his daughter. Emma looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, clearly afraid of his reaction. Rex stirred slightly, sensing the tension. Emma, Carlos said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm sorry I made you feel scared. I'm sorry I was so focused on fighting for time with you that I forgot to think about what you actually needed. I love you so much, and if you need this to feel safe, then that's what we'll do. Emma's lip trembled. You're not mad at me. Mad at you? Carlos let out a sob. No, sweetheart, I'm mad at myself. I'm sad because I'll miss seeing you every day, but I'm not mad at you. You did exactly what you should have done. You told the truth. He glanced at Rex and something like understanding flickered in his eyes. You were right about Rex, about needing one home. I didn't want to see it before, but I see it now. Maria was crying harder now, but she managed to speak. Carlos, I don't want to keep Emma from you. I never wanted that. I just want her to feel safe. I know, Carlos said quietly. I know that now. Judge Morrison watched this exchange with cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, these parents could learn to put their daughter first. This new custody arrangement will begin immediately, Morrison announced. Emma will remain in her mother's home as her primary residence starting tonight. "Mr. Rodriguez, your first scheduled parenting time will be this Wednesday for dinner. Use that time wisely, not to interrogate Emma, not to make her feel guilty, but to simply be her dad." She picked up her gavel, then paused. "One more thing. I'm citing Emma's testimony, specifically her Rex statement, as the primary factor in this decision. This case will be recorded as precedent, Rodriguez v. Rodriguez, with a special notation about child-centered custody determinations." Marcus Chen looked like he wanted to argue, but Linda Washington was already gathering her papers with barely suppressed triumph. "This court is adjourned," Morrison said, and her gavel fell with finality. In the moments that followed, Emma stood slowly and walked to her father. Carlos knelt down and pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I love you, Emma Bear," he whispered into her hair, "so much, and I'm going to do better, I promise." "I love you too, Daddy," Emma said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I'll see you Wednesday." "Wednesday," he confirmed. "We'll go to that pizza place you like, just you and me." When Emma pulled away and returned to her mother's side, she looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been physically lifted from her small shoulders. Officer Henderson approached Judge Morrison as the courtroom began to empty. "Your Honor, that was something special." Morrison smiled tiredly. "It was long overdue. Courts have been so afraid of appearing biased that we've created custody arrangements that serve everyone except the children. Maybe Emma and Rex just changed that." Henderson glanced at Rex, who was now sitting calmly beside Emma, accepting pets from both Maria and, hesitantly, from Carlos. "He's a good dog," Henderson said, "but I never thought he'd end up as a star witness in family court." "Sometimes the best teachers come on 4 legs," Morrison replied. "Thank you for your testimony, officer. You helped me give that little girl what she desperately needed, a home." As the Rodriguez family left the courtroom, separately but peacefully, Emma looked back one final time at Rex and Officer Henderson. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. Rex's tail wagged, and somehow Emma knew the dog understood. He'd been where she was, lost, confused, shuttled between places with no sense of belonging. And now they were both on the path to healing, one stable home at a time. The local Millbrook Gazette ran the story first, just 48 hours after Judge Morrison's ruling. The headline was modest: "Local judge makes unconventional custody ruling based on child's testimony." But by the end of the week, the story had exploded far beyond the small Ohio town. Emma's case, carefully anonymized in most reports as ERVER, became a national lightning rod. Within 72 hours, it was trending on social media under hashtags like Rex, On Home for Kids, and Listen to Children. The story had everything the internet loved: a brave child, an adorable police dog, an unconventional judge, and a challenge to the status quo. Judge Patricia Morrison arrived at the courthouse on Monday morning to find news vans parked outside. Reporters shouted questions as she walked up the steps, her security detail having to push through the crowd. "Judge Morrison, are you biased against fathers? Did you really let a dog influence a custody decision? What do you say to critics who call this judicial overreach?" Morrison kept her head down and her comments minimal. "I made a decision in the best interest of the child. That's my job. No further comment." But the controversy was just beginning. By Tuesday, fathers' rights organizations had mobilized. The National Coalition for Shared Parenting issued a scathing statement calling Morrison's ruling a dangerous precedent that undermines equal parenting rights. They announced plans to file an amicus brief supporting Carlos Rodriguez's appeal, which Marcus Chen had filed within hours of the ruling. "This judge essentially said that fathers are secondary parents," declared Robert Patterson, the coalition's spokesman, during a press conference. "She used a police dog, as justification for denying a loving father equal time with his daughter. This is exactly the kind of bias we've been fighting against for decades." The statement went viral, shared thousands of times by divorced fathers who felt the family court system was rigged against them. Internet forums exploded with angry posts about maternal preference and anti-father discrimination. But the backlash had a backlash. Dr. Sarah Chen, a clinical psychologist specializing in childhood trauma at Stanford University, saw the story on Wednesday morning while drinking her coffee. She immediately contacted her media liaison and requested to be put in touch with major news outlets. By Wednesday afternoon, she was on CNN. "Let me be absolutely clear," Dr. Chen said, leaning forward in her chair in the studio. "Judge Morrison's ruling isn't about fathers versus mothers. It's about stability versus chaos, and the research overwhelmingly supports what this child articulated using a dog as her metaphor." The anchor, Rachel Martinez, looked skeptical. But Dr. Chen, critics say that children need equal time with both parents. Isn't that the gold standard? "That's what we've been telling ourselves," Dr. Chen replied. "But the research doesn't actually support it, at least not the way we've been implementing it. Studies show that children of divorce do best with consistent routines, minimal transitions, and a clear sense of home base. The 50-50 custody split might feel fair to parents, but for many children, especially younger ones, it creates chronic instability." She pulled out a tablet and referenced a study. A 2019 longitudinal study published in the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry followed children in various custody arrangements for 5 years. Children in what they called primary residence arrangements, meaning one home base with generous visitation to the other parent, showed significantly lower anxiety levels and better academic performance than children in 50-50 arrangements. "So you're saying Judge Morrison made the right call?" "I'm saying she listened to the child," Dr. Chen emphasized. "Emma used a rescue dog to explain what psychologists have been trying to tell family courts for years, that children need an anchor. Officer Henderson's testimony about Rex wasn't just a cute story. It was a perfect parallel to attachment theory." She leaned closer to the camera. "Rex was moved between 4 shelters in 6 months. He became anxious, withdrawn, unable to bond. When he finally got one stable home, he thrived. Emma was being moved between 2 homes every few days. She became so anxious she stopped talking. The parallel is exact." The CNN segment was shared across social media, racking up millions of views. Team Emma and Dr. Chen is right began trending alongside the more critical hashtags. By Thursday, the story had reached the major morning shows. Good Morning America decided to do something unprecedented. They invited Officer Mike Henderson and Rex to appear on air. Henderson was reluctant at first. "I'm not looking for attention," he told the producer. "I just testified about my dog." "You did more than that," the producer replied. "You gave a voice to what thousands of children are experiencing. Parents need to hear this." So on Friday morning, Henderson and Rex appeared on national television. The segment opened with a recap of Emma's story, carefully edited to protect her identity, followed by footage of police dogs in training. Then the camera cut to Henderson sitting in a studio chair, with Rex lying calmly at his feet. "Officer Henderson," began the host, Michael Strahan, "you've become an unexpected voice in the custody debate. Did you ever imagine your testimony about Rex would spark this kind of conversation?" "Not at all," Henderson admitted, shaking his head. "I was just trying to help a little girl who reminded me of my dog. They'd both been through similar trauma, constant instability, not knowing where they belonged." "Some critics have said it's inappropriate to compare children to dogs," Strahan noted. "What do you say to that?" Henderson bristled slightly. "I'm not comparing children to dogs in value or worth. I'm comparing their basic needs. All mammals, dogs, children, even adults, need stability to thrive. We need to know where we belong. That's not controversial. That's biology." Robin Roberts, co-hosting, leaned in. "Can you tell us more about Rex's transformation? What was he like when you first got him?" Henderson's hand dropped to Rex's head, and the dog's tail thumped against the floor. Rex was a mess. Anxious, withdrawn, wouldn't make eye contact. He'd been failed by every system that was supposed to help him, moved from shelter to shelter, each time being told he'd find a home, and each time being disappointed. And now he's the best detection dog in our department. He's confident, focused, happy. He does school visits where kids line up to meet him. He's a completely different dog, not because I'm some amazing trainer, but because he finally has stability. He knows where home is. The camera zoomed in on Rex, who looked up at Henderson with obvious adoration and trust. "Some people watching might be going through custody battles right now," Roberts said gently. "What would you say to them?" Henderson was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I'd say that love isn't measured in equal time. It's measured in putting your child's needs first, even when it hurts, even when it means you don't get what you want." He paused. "Emma's father loves her. I could see that in court, but he was so focused on his right to equal time that he couldn't see what it was doing to his daughter. Once he finally heard her, really heard her, he chose to support what she needed. That's real love." The interview ended with footage of Rex demonstrating his detection skills, finding a hidden training package in under 30 seconds. When he succeeded, Henderson gave him a treat and vigorous praise. The affection between man and dog was obvious and genuine. Within hours, the video had been viewed over 10 million times. Comments flooded in, some supportive, some critical, but all engaged with the fundamental question Emma had raised. What do children of divorce really need? The backlash intensified over the weekend. Fox News ran a segment titled, "When Dogs Decide Custody, Has Family Court Gone Too Far?" 3 legal analysts debated heatedly, with 2 arguing that Morrison had overstepped her authority. "This judge substituted her personal feelings for established legal standards," argued former Judge Andrew Miller. "The default in custody cases should be equal parenting time unless there's evidence of abuse or neglect. One parent's anger issues that haven't resulted in violence shouldn't be grounds for reducing their custody." But the third analyst, family law attorney Jennifer Walsh, pushed back hard. "Did you actually read the case transcript? The child stopped speaking for 3 weeks. She was living out of a backpack, forgetting homework, developing severe anxiety. That is harm, emotional and psychological harm." The debate raged on television, radio, podcasts, and social media. Legal scholars weighed in from law schools across the country. Some called Morrison's decision a much-needed correction to family court bias toward parental rights over child welfare. Others warned of a slippery slope, where judges could arbitrarily reduce one parent's time based on subjective interpretations of a child's needs. Meanwhile, in Millbrook, Emma was adjusting to her new reality. For the first time in months, she woke up in the same bedroom 5 days in a row. Her homework stayed in one backpack, on one desk, in one room. She didn't have to pack and unpack. She didn't have to remember which house held which belongings. Maria watched her daughter slowly come back to life, talking more at dinner, laughing at silly jokes, sleeping through the night without nightmares. On Wednesday evening, Carlos picked Emma up for their scheduled dinner time. He'd spent the week in therapy, confronting his anger issues for the first time. When Emma came to the door, he didn't grill her about her week or complain about the new arrangement. He simply smiled and said, "Ready for pizza, Emma Bear." They went to her favorite restaurant, and Carlos let Emma talk about school, her friends, a book she was reading. He didn't mention the custody case, didn't ask about her mother, didn't make her feel guilty. And when he dropped her back at Maria's house at 8 p.m. sharp, he hugged her tight and said, "I love you. See you Saturday." Emma watched him drive away, and for the first time she didn't feel torn in two. She knew she'd see him again. She knew he loved her, but she also knew where home was. Back at his apartment, Carlos called his attorney. "Marcus, I want to withdraw the appeal." "What?" Chen sounded shocked. Mr. Rodriguez, we have excellent grounds. The Father's Rights Coalition is willing to fund. I don't care, Carlos interrupted. I saw my daughter tonight, really saw her. She's getting better, Marcus. She's talking again. She's not scared anymore. I'm not going to drag her through more legal battles just to prove a point. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Chen said quietly, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Judge Morrison was right. Emma needed one home, and I need to be the dad who gives her what she needs, not what I want." When the appeal was withdrawn the following week, it made national news again. Carlos released a short statement through his attorney. "I love my daughter more than my pride. Judge Morrison's ruling is giving Emma the stability she needs, and I will not fight it. I encourage other parents in similar situations to listen, really listen, to what your children are telling you." The statement went viral for different reasons than the original controversy. Suddenly, Carlos wasn't the victim of judicial bias. He was a father who'd put his ego aside for his child's well-being. The narrative shifted. Dr. Chen appeared on morning television again, this time with tears in her eyes. This is what we need more of, parents who can see past their own hurt to what their children actually need. Mr. Rodriguez just modeled something incredibly difficult and incredibly important. As October turned to November, the Emma Rodriguez case had become a cultural touchstone. Law schools added it to their family law curricula. Custody mediators used it as a teaching tool. Therapy offices displayed printouts of the like Rex, quote, as a reminder to listen to children. And in Millbrook, a little girl who'd been too scared to speak was now raising her hand in class, joining the school choir and sleeping peacefully in her own bed, in her one home, every single night. Sometimes a revolution starts with a whisper, and sometimes that whisper is just two words, like Rex. Gymnasium of Millbrook Elementary School buzzed with excitement on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Emma Rodriguez had uttered the two words that changed her life. Fifth graders filled the bleachers, their voices echoing off the polished floors as they waited for the special Career Day presentation to begin. Emma sat in the front row, her legs swinging nervously beneath the bench. But it wasn't the anxious, stomach-churning nervousness of a year ago. This was anticipation, the good kind. She wore her favorite purple hoodie and had braided her own hair that morning, something she'd learned to do from YouTube tutorials. She looked like a different child than the pale, silent girl who'd clutched Mr. Buttons in that courtroom. "Are you ready for this?" Her best friend, Jasmine, whispered beside her. Jasmine had moved to Millbrook in January, and the two girls had bonded immediately over a shared love of mystery novels and chocolate chip cookies. "So ready," Emma replied with a grin. "I've been waiting for this all month." Principal Davies stepped to the center of the gym, her voice booming through the microphone. "Good morning, Millbrook Mustangs. Today we have a very special guest. Some of you may remember him from the news last year. Please welcome Officer Mike Henderson and his partner Rex from the Millbrook Police Department." The gymnasium erupted in cheers as Henderson walked through the side doors, Rex trotting proudly beside him. The German Shepherd's police vest gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his tail wagged as he scanned the crowd of children. When his eyes landed on Emma in the front row, his tail wagged faster. Emma's heart swelled. It had been months since she'd seen Rex in person, though she'd followed his career through news stories and Officer Henderson's occasional emails with photos. The dog looked magnificent, confident, professional, and happy. "Thank you, Principal Davies," Henderson said, his voice carrying easily through the gym. "Rex and I are excited to be here today to tell you about K-9 police work, but before we get started, I need to do something." He looked directly at Emma. "Emma Rodriguez, could you come up here, please?" Emma's eyes widened. She hadn't known this was part of the plan. Jasmine gave her an encouraging nudge, and Emma stood on shaky legs, walking across the gym floor while her classmates whispered excitedly. When she reached Henderson's side, Rex immediately pressed against her leg, and she automatically dropped her hand to his head. The familiar warmth of his fur grounded her. "A year ago," Henderson began, addressing the assembled students, "I met Emma in a courthouse hallway. She was going through a really difficult time, and she couldn't find the words to tell the adults around her what she needed. But when she met Rex, something changed." Emma felt her cheeks flush as hundreds of eyes focused on her. Emma used Rex, used his story of going from scared and anxious to happy and confident to explain what she was feeling, Henderson continued. She pointed at him and said 2 words, like Rex. Those 2 words helped the adults in her life finally understand what she'd been trying to tell them. He knelt down beside Emma, putting them at the same height. "Emma, I want to thank you. Because of your courage, because of your honesty, you've helped change how courts think about kids going through custody battles. Hundreds of children across the country are getting the stability they need because you spoke up." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears. "I just didn't want to feel confused anymore," she said softly into Henderson's microphone. "I wanted what Rex had, one home where I belonged." "And did you get it?" Henderson asked gently. Emma nodded, a smile breaking across her face. "I did, and Rex was right, everything got better once I had one home." The students erupted in applause, and Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years, proud of herself. "Now," Henderson said, standing and addressing the crowd again, "Emma's going to help me demonstrate what Rex can do. Emma, you're going to be my assistant today. Sound good?" "Really?" Emma's face lit up. "Yes." For the next 45 minutes, Emma helped Henderson demonstrate Rex's incredible skills. She hid training pouches around the gymnasium while Rex waited patiently, his nose twitching with anticipation. Then, on Henderson's command, Rex located each one in under 3 minutes, earning enthusiastic applause from the students. Emma threw a training toy for Rex to fetch, watched him demonstrate obedience commands, and even got to give him treats when he performed correctly. Each time Rex succeeded, he looked at Emma as if to say, "Did you see that? Did I do good?" And Emma would laugh and scratch behind his ears, her confidence growing with each moment. When the demonstration ended, Principal Davies opened the floor for questions. Dozens of hands shot up. "How long did it take to train Rex?" one boy asked. "What's the coolest thing Rex has ever found?" asked another. "Does Rex ever get scared?" a girl in the back called out. Henderson answered each question patiently, with Emma still standing beside him. When the questions finally wound down, one more hand went up, a small girl in the 3rd row. "Yes," Henderson pointed to her. "Is it true that Rex used to be really sad?" the girl asked. "My parents are getting divorced, and sometimes I feel really sad too." The gymnasium went quiet. Henderson glanced at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. She understood exactly what this girl was feeling. "It's true," Henderson said gently. "Rex was very sad when I first got him. He'd been moved around a lot and he didn't know where he belonged. Does that sound familiar?" The girl nodded, her eyes glistening. "But here's what I want you to know," Henderson continued. "Rex got better. It took time and it took patience, but once he had a stable home and knew he was safe, he started to heal. And now he's happy, really, truly happy." He paused, then added, "Divorce is hard, it's confusing, and it's okay to feel sad about it, but you can still be okay. You can still be happy, just like Rex, just like Emma." Emma stepped forward to the microphone. "It does get better," she said, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. "I promise. It took me a while, but it really does get better." The little girl wiped her eyes and nodded, managing a small smile. After the presentation ended, students lined up to pet Rex and take pictures with him. Emma stood beside Henderson, helping manage the crowd, feeling more confident and capable than she ever had before. When the last student had left and the gymnasium was quiet again, Principal Davies approached. "Emma, that was wonderful. You should be very proud of yourself." "Thank you," Emma said, and she meant it. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined standing in front of her entire school, talking about her family's struggles. But now, it felt important to share her story, to let other kids know they weren't alone. As Henderson packed up his equipment, Emma knelt beside Rex one more time. "Thank you," she whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Thank you for teaching them to listen." Rex's tail thumped against the floor, and he gently licked her cheek. Henderson smiled, watching the bond between child and dog. "You know, Emma, Rex has been doing more school visits lately because of your story," Henderson said. "Kids relate to him, to the idea that even when things are hard, you can still end up happy and safe. You too started something important." "Really?" Emma looked up at him, eyes wide. "Really? There's even talk of creating a program, using therapy dogs to help kids going through custody issues. They're calling it the Rex Protocol." Emma's heart swelled with pride. Rex, her Rex, the dog who'd understood her when no one else could, was helping other kids. It felt perfect. That evening, Emma sat at the kitchen table in her home, her one, stable, wonderful home, doing homework. Math problems that would have seemed impossible a year ago now felt manageable. She knew where her calculator was, in the second drawer. She knew where her textbook was, on the shelf above her desk. She knew where she'd be sleeping tonight, in her room, in her bed, with her things. The front door opened and Maria came in carrying groceries. "Hey, sweetheart, how was career day?" "It was amazing, Mom," Emma said, looking up with bright eyes. "Rex was there, and Officer Henderson let me help with the demonstration, and I got to talk to the whole school about what happened, and—" She paused, taking a breath. "And I think I actually helped some kids feel better about their parents' divorces." Maria set down the groceries and pulled Emma into a hug. "I'm so proud of you, baby. Look how far you've come." And it was true. Emma's grades had climbed from CS and DS to AS and BS. Her teachers reported that she participated actively in class discussions. She joined the school choir and was learning to play the piano. Most importantly, she slept peacefully through the night, no longer plagued by anxiety dreams about forgetting things or disappointing her parents. Her relationship with her father had healed too, in ways she hadn't expected. Carlos had completed his anger management program and continued with therapy. Their Wednesday dinners and weekend visits had developed a comfortable rhythm. Last month, he'd even come to her choir concert, sitting on the opposite side of the auditorium from Maria, but both of them cheering equally loud. Just last week, Emma had overheard her parents talking civilly on the phone about her upcoming birthday party, actually discussing logistics without arguing, working together to make sure Emma felt celebrated. It was a small thing, maybe, but to Emma it felt like a miracle. Later that night, after finishing her homework and FaceTiming with her dad to tell him about Rex's visit, Emma sat at her desk and opened her journal, a gift from her therapist, Dr. Stevens, who she still saw once a month. She wrote October 15th. "Rex came to school today. A year ago I met him in the courthouse and everything changed. I couldn't talk then, but he helped me find my voice. Now I'm happy. I have one home like Rex. I see both my parents and they're not fighting anymore. Dad's getting better at controlling his anger. Mom smiles more. And I'm finally just me, not the kid stuck in the middle, just Emma." Officer Henderson says Rex and I started something called the Rex Protocol. They're going to use therapy dogs to help other kids like me. I hope it helps them the way Rex helped me. I hope they find their voice too. Sometimes I wonder if Rex knows how important he is. Probably not. He's just a dog doing his job. But to me, he's a hero. He saved me when I didn't even know I needed saving. She closed the journal and looked at the photo on her desk, taken today, showing Emma kneeling beside Rex, both of them smiling. Well, Rex was panting happily, which was basically a dog smile. Officer Henderson had printed it for her before they left. Across town, in his comfortable house, Officer Henderson sat on his couch with Rex sprawled beside him. He was scrolling through emails, reading messages from parents and family law attorneys across the country, all asking about the Rodriguez case, all wanting to know more about how a police dog had revolutionized their thinking about custody arrangements. One email in particular caught his attention. It was from Judge Patricia Morrison. "Mike, I wanted you to know that the Rodriguez case has been cited in 17 custody decisions across 6 states in the past year. Law schools are teaching it. Mediators are using it. We're seeing a real shift toward child-centered custody arrangements instead of parent-centered ones." But more importantly, I got a call from Emma's therapist last week. She says Emma is thriving. The selective mutism is completely resolved. Her anxiety levels are normal for a child her age. She's engaged in school, making friends, pursuing hobbies. You and Rex didn't just help one little girl find her voice. You helped change a system that was failing thousands of children. That's no small thing. With gratitude, Judge Patricia Morrison. Henderson looked down at Rex, who gazed back with those wise brown eyes. "You hear that, buddy? We're heroes." Rex's tail thumped twice against the couch cushion, and he rested his head on Henderson's lap with a contented sigh. "Of course you already knew that," Henderson said with a laugh, scratching behind Rex's ears. "You always know." A year ago, a traumatized child had pointed at a police dog and spoken 2 words that changed her life. Those 2 words, like Rex, had rippled outward, challenging assumptions, changing laws, and ultimately helping countless children find the stability they desperately needed. Emma Rodriguez was no longer the silent, scared girl living out of a backpack. She was a confident 5th grader with dreams of becoming a veterinarian so she could help animals like Rex. She had one home, 2 parents who were learning to co-parent peacefully, and a future full of possibility. And Rex continued doing what he'd always done, his job with excellence, his life with joy, secure in the knowledge that at the end of every shift, he knew exactly where he was going: home. Sometimes the most profound changes start with the smallest voices, and sometimes those voices find their power through the most unexpected teachers, like a rescue dog who understood what it meant to finally belong. Emma's story was far from over, but the hardest chapter had closed. She'd survived the storm, found her voice, and emerged stronger. And she'd done it all with a little help from a dog named Rex who taught her, and the world, that everyone deserves one place to call home. The end.